I always get asked if it's weird being an orphan, if I miss my parents. But what people don't understand is that I lost my parents when I was 3. I have little to no memories of them. My first memory is holding on to a caretaker's hand as I entered the orphanage I spent my childhood and early teenage years in. Hi there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We greatly appreciate it. The orphanage was pretty dull. My everyday routine was too repetitive. I woke up, showered, had breakfast in the dining hall by myself, and then went to school. Breakfast and lunch were a drag. None of the boys in my dormitory talked to me, and if they did, they would just taunt me. "Eat up, Skelly," they'd say while tossing their half-eaten food onto my tray. They made fun of me for being a skinny guy, saying I looked like a skeleton. School was no better. I went to a terrible public school because it was free. I had to pinch myself to keep from falling asleep because the teachers all seemed to hate their job and would only teach by reading out a slideshow. I already knew everything they taught because I took it upon myself to learn, knowing my teachers were all useless. "You cheated on the last test, didn't you?" my history teacher asked me one time. "Everyone else failed it, and you got a perfect score. Admit you cheated." He knew his teaching was terrible, so bad that he was surprised when I got good scores. "Sir, I just taught myself. I know you don't teach, so I might as well do it," I replied. That, of course, landed me in detention. But detention was in the school library, where I spent most of my time anyways. It wasn't nearly as good as the city's library, though. That's where I went every day after school to teach myself. It was heaven to me. I could almost hear angels singing and harps playing every time I walked through the doors. One day, I was returning to the orphanage after going to the library. I checked out loads of books, a stack so big I could barely see over it. I bumped into someone where I expected to bump into the gate. I put my books down and immediately apologized. It was a man in a dark coat and sunglasses. He took them off to get a better look at me. He had a really charming smile. The woman, who I guessed was his wife, came out from behind him. They looked like a couple you'd see in a movie. "No worries, buddy," the man said after I apologized. They were ringing the doorbell, but no one answered. I also wanted to go in and put the books in my room. "Don't tell anybody about this or I'll get in trouble," I said to them before doing the trick I always used to open the gate to the orphanage. I stuck a paperclip in the lock and jiggled it around while kicking the door lightly with one foot. The lock popped and the gate flew open. "It'll be our secret," said the woman with a smile. "What's your name?" she asked me. "I'm Donnie," I answered. I then entered the building and ran up to my dormitory. I wasn't getting my hopes up about that couple. They probably wanted to adopt a baby like everybody else. I didn't expect to be wrong about that. I was almost devouring one of the books I got when the door opened. I was immediately irritated to see Jerry, one of the people who worked at the orphanage. "Donnie, you're being requested downstairs. There's a couple wanting to meet you," he said. It was the last thing I expected him to say. "Are you sure it's me? It could be Donnie S. or Donnie W., I said, because I really didn't believe him. "They wanted the Donnie with the books, so that must be you," said Jerry, growing irritated. "Come on, I don't have time for this," he said. I finally believed him and walked downstairs after him. I went into the office where the director was and saw that the couple who wanted to meet me were the same ones I met at the door. I was suddenly excited. They seemed really cool. "Donnie, meet Mr. and Mrs. Crumb," said the director before leaving us to get to know each other. We talked for about half an hour, and it felt completely natural. After around a month of legal procedures, they took me home with them. I was so happy. I met my adoptive brother and sister. My brother was a few years younger, and my sister was older. They didn't look like the Crumbs, but they looked like each other, so I guessed the Crumbs adopted a pair of siblings. I started going to school after I got settled into my new home. It was intimidating. I didn't know if I could adjust to proper education, but it was fantastic. All I got was praise. My teachers were all surprised at how much I knew and that I was even ahead in the syllabus. My life at home was nice too. It was super sweet to have a room of my own, but something felt off. The Crumbs were never around. Sometimes I'd go days without seeing them, only communicating with them through notes left on the fridge. I talked to my siblings, Melanie and Jasper. Melanie was too stressed trying to figure out what to study in college, and Jasper was too busy working out to improve his stamina to notice that the crumbs were never around. Listen, Donnie, we're just glad we didn't get split up. Many wanted only me or only Jasper, but the crumbs took both of us. That's enough, said Melanie after I had been pestering her for a long time. But I still wanted to know why they were never around. I snuck into the Crumbs' room one night. They almost never slept at home, so I was safe. I was digging through Mr. Crumb's nightstand when the door opened. I ducked down and rolled under the bed. I heard both of them yawn and fall onto the bed. All this traveling is killing me, said Mrs. Crumb. I know, me too, replied Mr. Crumb. They were silent for a few minutes, and then I heard them snoring. I crawled from under the bed and out the door, pretending I was coming from the bathroom. A different day, I snuck into the study. I found a photo album in a drawer. The first picture was the Crumbs when they were kids. They were with two couples, probably their parents. In the next picture, they were much older. They were standing with 3 kids on a beach. Are those their kids? I wondered. There were countless pictures like that. They were also in a bunch of different houses. How did they know so many kids? Something smelled fishy. What did they want so many kids for? I was creeped out. I put the book back where I found it and left, trying to forget about it. I couldn't help it though. I hid whenever the Crumbs came home. A few times I even grabbed Melanie and Jasper and asked them to go to the store with me. They ignored me whenever I tried to warn them that the Crumbs were up to something. Can you blame me for not trusting them? There's very few reasons why someone would want so many kids, and none of them are pretty. I feared for my life, but everyone seemed to think I was losing it. I wasn't. I swore I wasn't. I kept thinking about that book. I was distracted while standing at my locker in school when someone slammed the door shut, barely missing my fingers. Dude, what the hell? I shouted when I saw the guy who did it. He was around my age. He shoved me so my back hit the lockers. People started staring. You stole my parents, shouted the guy. Dude, I don't even know you. What are you on about? I shouted back. The guy swung at me, but I dodged his fist and swung right back. Soon enough, we were rolling on the floor, fighting, and 2 teachers had to split us up and took us to the principal's office. I'm disappointed in you boys, said the principal. He attacked me, I explained to her. That's no reason for you to attack back, she reprimanded me. I crossed my arms and sunk into my chair. She called both our parents. After a few minutes, she told us that the 2 couples and she had decided that suspension for 2 weeks was a good enough punishment. The principal watched the guy and me leave to make sure we wouldn't fight again, at least not on school grounds. I took the bus home and he rode his bike away. The beginning of my suspension was chill. I was enjoying the time at home, but not even 3 hours in, I started losing my mind. I'm missing out on dissecting a goat eye, I complained to myself. I started thinking of ways to spend the time. Studying was of no use because I was ahead in every class. I was banging my head against my desk trying to think of something to do when a light bulb lit up over my head. I grabbed a paper and my pencil case and started sketching and designing. After an hour, I had designed a small GPS to track the Crumbs with. All I needed now was the materials to build it, and I knew exactly where to get everything I needed. After a few hours, school was over. I was dressed in all black and the sun was starting to go down, so I could hide in the shadows. I knew the window to the janitor's shed was easy to slide open, so I climbed in through there and found the keys to the main building. I crawled around and avoided the cameras all I could. It was difficult, but I made it into the robotics lab. I got to work, and since everything was already on paper, I just had to follow my own instructions and assemble the GPS. It was easy enough. I stuffed it into my duffel bag and snuck back out of the school, leaving no evidence behind. The Crumbs gave me chores to do at home as part of my punishment. One of them was mowing the lawn, which was the perfect opportunity to plant my GPS under their car. Good luck, buddy, I whispered to it. I felt like it was my child. It was almost hard to say goodbye. Mr. Crumb almost saw me, but I got lucky and spotted a tennis ball under the car, so I pretended I was just grabbing it from under there. When I was done mowing the lawn, I ran upstairs and used my laptop to activate the GPS. The location was so accurate, I had to give myself a pat on the back. When the Crumbs left home, I tracked their every move. They drove all around town all day long. They spent no more than an hour in each location, the same amount of time they usually spent at home. The laptop even tracked their locations when I was asleep. So next morning, I saw that they spent half the night in one place and the rest of the night in another. It was so strange. I could tell this wasn't business related because they went to residential areas. Why residential areas? Is that where they kept the kids? Were the others locked up in basements? What if Melanie, Jasper, and I were the only lucky ones who got to live in a house? I wanted to go check out the houses myself, but what if I got caught? What if I tried freeing the kids from cages in a basement and got locked up in one myself? I tracked their location and saw a pattern. I waited until it was time for them to come home, and at dinner that night, I confronted them. "Why are you never here?" I questioned. "You're never with us. I'm the only one who sees that Melanie is having a mental breakdown over choosing a career, and Jasper probably has asthma. The kid can't run up the stairs without wheezing," I shouted at them. They were dumbfounded. I could almost see the gears in their brains trying to come up with excuses. I put my knife and fork down and ran up to my room. I was so frustrated. I plopped down on the floor trying to calm myself down. I was more angry for my siblings. I was independent, but those two needed help. There was a soft knock on my door, and then the Crumbs came in and sat across from me on the floor. "It's time we told one of you the truth," said Mrs. Crumb. "We've been hiding it for too long." They started explaining their life story to me. They were both the children of two extremely wealthy families. They grew up together and then went to the same orphanage when their parents died in a car crash. They fell in love and finally had access to their parents' money when they turned 18. They decided that they would adopt as many kids as possible and take care of them the way they wished they were taken care of when they became orphans. "So you don't adopt kids to keep them in cages?" I asked. "No, gosh, we do the opposite," Mrs. Crumb said, chuckling at the end. Suddenly, it all made sense. The guy who attacked me at school must have found out about me and gotten jealous or defensive. "But you're right, Don. We need to spend more time with you guys, all of you," Mr. Crumb said. "We promise we'll figure something out," said Mrs. Crumb, and they did. Within a month, the Crumbs bought an apartment building. We all moved in, all of us. I had at least 50 siblings. We all shared an apartment with one or two others. I stayed with Melanie and Jasper. Our parents got the top floor, so they were only an elevator ride away. The ground floor was converted into a common room where we could all get together and spend time together. I even made peace with the guy who attacked me. We actually have a lot in common. I went up to the penthouse one day. My parents were in their living room. They got up to greet me, so I ran towards them and gave them a big hug. "Thank you," I said. Before I met them, I was alone and had no prospects at all. With them in my life, I have a huge, loving family and a bright future ahead.
Wow, what lovely flowers! Thank you so much, I said while I jumped into my boyfriend Teddy's arms. He was the love of my life, and there was nothing anyone could do to tear us apart. "You're welcome, Kaylee. Anything for you, my love muffin," he replied while he squeezed me tightly. I had never been this in love before. Well, I was only 17 years old, but I didn't believe that I could possibly love anyone else that much. I knew everything about him. His favorite color, food, place, thing, what he wore to sleep, what he ate for breakfast. I could go on and on. Despite the fact that he came from a poor family, he always found a way to surprise me with beautiful gifts. But before I continue, please don't forget to like my video and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any great stories. My parents hated Teddy. They had a lot of money and believed that I should be with someone in my social class. But why should loving a person depend on how much money they had? I believe that someone's personality mattered more. And Teddy had a perfect one, or at least it was perfect for me. But the first time I brought him home for dinner, they frowned the whole time and kept making disrespectful remarks. I was so embarrassed. Even though we were quite wealthy, I was never spoiled, and I was always taught to work hard for whatever I wanted. I worked 2 jobs and I was paying to finish my bachelor's degree online. I chose to do it online because I didn't want to move far away from Teddy. Anyway, my 18th birthday was coming up and I was super excited. I just planned to go out to dinner with Teddy, nothing fancy, but on the day, my parents totally surprised me. When I woke up, the house was beautifully decorated with balloons and banners that said, "Happy birthday, Kaylee." I found this a bit odd because my parents were never that extravagant. When I got to the dining room to have breakfast, my parents were sitting there. "Happy birthday, darling. We have a wonderful surprise for you," my mom said. "You're really going to love it," my dad added as he passed me a big blue envelope. Okay, I said while opening it. There was a bunch of documents and I really wasn't in the mood to read. "What's all this about?" I asked. "They're legal documents. We've bought you an island," my dad said with so much excitement I thought he was going to pop. "An island? You guys refused to buy me a cell phone last year, and I'm supposed to believe this? Is this some kind of joke?" I laughed. "No, it isn't. We've also transferred $500,000 to your bank account. We've admired that you are so hardworking, even though you don't really need to be. We believe that we've taught you all you need to know about responsibility, so now we are ready to share our little, or not so little, fortune with you. Now that you're legally an adult, think of it as our investment in your future," my mom said. I looked through the documents carefully this time and realized they weren't lying. "Oh my gosh," I thought. "This little island is located somewhere in the Pacific. We've already bought tickets for you and Teddy, so you can go there for a while to enjoy yourselves. There's a little beachfront house where you can stay. As soon as you arrive, you'll be shown where to go." My mom smiled. "You bought tickets for me and Teddy? I thought you hated Teddy. I didn't even know you guys had so much money. This is so confusing," I said. "Don't think too much. Go pack your bags and ask Teddy to pack his too. You leave tomorrow evening," they replied. I ran to my room to call Teddy to give him the news. "An island? Are you serious? What are you going to do with an island?" he asked. "Well, I'm not sure. Maybe I could build a hotel or something. Maybe I could sell it and use the money for something else. I don't know. Anyway, my parents have bought us plane tickets. We leave tomorrow night," I said. "Wow, this is so exciting," he said. We used the day to prepare for our trip. We bought a few things we thought we would need and packed a small suitcase because we both hated carrying too much stuff around. The next day, I could hardly contain my excitement. I felt like I was dreaming. Not only did my parents give me the best gift I could have ever asked for, but I was going on my first trip with my dear boyfriend. We would get to share a room and a bed and spend almost all our time together for days. I had never felt so happy. The plane rides and layovers took forever. Then we reached a large island and had to take a ferry to the small island, which was mine. When we arrived, it was midday. A well-dressed man was waiting where the ferry docked. He took our bags and asked us to follow him. "Your parents employed me and 2 other helpers to take care of you during your vacation here. I'm Benjamin," he said. We walked for about 5 minutes, then arrived at a huge beachfront house. "I thought my parents said this place was little. Wow!" I exclaimed. "It's a wonderful house, and it's all yours. You've got a pool, a bar, a jacuzzi, and pretty much everything else you can imagine. I wish I could stay here all the time." Ha 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 ha. Benjamin laughed. My parents' gift kept getting better and better. It was surreal. Our first few days on the island were more than perfect. Teddy and I woke up in each other's arms every day. Then we'd enjoy the breakfast that was prepared for us. After that, we'd head to the beach, swim, snorkel, and then have a picnic on the sand. When we got back to the beach house, a 3-course lunch was already prepared for us, and we just laze around for the rest of the day. It was all I needed. Then one day, we got tired of our routine. "Why don't we go exploring a bit? I don't know what most of this island looks like anyway," I said to Teddy. "Sure, we'll go hiking," he said. We got ready and began exploring. Being surrounded by so much green was refreshing. The plants and trees were so fresh and different from what I was used to in the city back home. We walked further towards the interior of the island and away from the sea. The temperature changed and the air became more humid. I sat down for a while to catch my breath. "Here, have a snack, love," Teddy said while handing me a granola bar. Thanks, I replied. As I lifted my head to take the bar, I saw a figure run behind him. I think there's someone here, I gasped. I got up and walked in the direction where I had seen the figure. Oh my gosh, Teddy, look! There's a whole village here, I whispered while staring in awe. We were on top of a little hill looking down. Below, there were about 15 small huts and several men, women, and children. They were dressed differently from us and looked quite happy. Let's go back before anyone sees us. We don't really know what they're like, Teddy said. I agreed, and we quickly walked back to the beach house. After a most exquisite dinner that night, Teddy and I sat on the balcony looking at the stars. How can I own an island if people already live there? My parents forgot to mention that part. I don't think it's right, I said. We eventually went to bed because we were tired from such an exhausting day. Just as I was falling into a deep sleep, I heard a crashing noise. Teddy, wake up! What was that? I jumped. What? He groaned. I had no time to explain because at the moment our bedroom door was flung open and 3 huge men barged in. They looked very much like the natives we had seen earlier. I was frozen. They quickly approached us, tied our arms and legs, and then lifted us into their arms. Help! Stop! We both screamed, but no one heard. Not even the servants who should have been downstairs sleeping. I couldn't understand how all the noise hadn't woken them up. They carried us out of the house and walked through the bushes until they reached the little village we had seen earlier that day. We were taken into one of the little huts and thrown on the floor. Why have you brought us here? What have we done wrong? I cried. Please, let us go, said Teddy while shaking. They replied, but we couldn't understand what they were saying. I continued asking them to let us go, and eventually we were gagged so we wouldn't make any noise. All I could do was cry. I was so scared. We were left there for 3 days. Occasionally, the gags were taken off, and we were force-fed water and fruits. Then, on the 3rd night, I heard someone speaking English in the distance. The voice came closer, and I realized it was Benjamin. He was talking on the phone. He looked inside, and we pretended to be asleep. What do you mean, just the boy? We have both of them. Yes, we arranged to kill him. Yes, Mr. Adams, we will ensure that your daughter isn't hurt and that she is rid of that boy forever. Yes, 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 he said, then went silent. My stomach turned. Was this all a setup so my parents could get rid of Teddy? How could they do this? Teddy looked like he was about to cry. We had to find a way to escape, and I knew we were both thinking it, but we had no idea how. When there were no more noises outside, I started thinking. The only thing in the room was a lamp, and the fire was growing dim. It became clear what I had to do. I had to find a way to get to it and burn the middle part of the ropes which tied my hands together. It took a lot of struggling, and Teddy kept looking at me like I was totally insane. But I got my hands loose without burning my skin too much. I ungagged and untied myself and Teddy. Let's go, I whispered. We got up and ran. When we got back to the house, it was in complete darkness. Quick, grab your cell phone and let's go live. Let our followers know everything and get them to contact the police at home. If we have a hard time getting through this, at least they'll know where to search for us, Teddy shouted. I grabbed my phone and did as he said, then we packed our bags and went outside to hide until the sun came out. After we went to the place where the ferry had docked when we first arrived on the island, there was nothing there. How exactly are we going to get to the island with the airport? I asked. Look over there, he said while pointing to a small fishing boat. There appeared to be a little engine attached. I'll use my phone to get the correct coordinates. Come on, let's go. I've never done this before, but we have no choice, he said. I fell more and more in love with him. Teddy, you're so amazing. When we get back home, I want to marry you, I said. He smiled at me as we sped away in the boat. We made it to the island safely and went straight to the airport. We were able to purchase tickets right away and would only have to wait until the afternoon to leave. It was a long wait, but I felt grateful that Teddy and I were together and that we were alive. When we got back home, there were thousands of people standing there and so many reporters trying to interview us. Apparently, our live stream went viral, and everyone was concerned about our safety. I grabbed Teddy's hand, and he let go quickly. I wondered why. Suddenly, a beautiful girl jumped out of nowhere, straight into his arms. Teddy, I missed you so much. I was so worried. He held on to her tightly and said, I'll never leave your side again. Then, they kissed. I nearly fainted. I stormed out of the airport and took a cab home. Later, I found out that he had been engaged to that girl way before he had even met me. He was only using me for money. He never really loved me. And the worst part of it all was that he never even bothered to reach out to me or to apologize. I instantly regretted my decision, which led to my parents' arrest. They had seen right through him and just wanted me to be with a better person. I should have left him on the island, which was never mine, by the way. I felt betrayed by everyone.
My brother Tom and I had always been close. We did everything together. Growing up, we were never apart. I couldn't imagine my life without him. I never thought I would one day have to choose between saving his life or my girlfriend's. But before I go on, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more crazy stories. We grew up in a small country town. There weren't many kids in our area. The local school only had 50 students. I think that's why my brother Tom and I spent all of our time together. We weren't just brothers, we were best friends. Tom was only 1 year older than me. He always took care of me. One time, we were playing by the creek when I tripped and fell into the water. Tom just jumped straight in after me and helped me get back out onto dry land. I knew that he would always be there for me no matter what. Mom would sometimes get annoyed that my room was all messy. She would say I had to stay home and clean it up. Tom would just look at me and say, "It's okay, I'll help you tidy up and then we can go out and play together." When Tom started school, I missed him. I would spend all day asking Mom if it was nearly time for Tom to come home. Mom would laugh at me and say, "Don't worry, it'll soon be time for you to go to school too." On my first day at school, I walked next to Tom excitedly. I wasn't nervous at all. Tom was going to look after me. He showed me which was my classroom and said he would wait for me at break time. We never fought or argued. My parents' friends thought it was so nice how well we got along. We both joined the school football team. I was so proud of Tom when he scored a goal. When I got the trophy for Player of the Year, Tom was the one shouting and cheering the loudest. I thought that we would always be close like this. I couldn't imagine anything or anyone coming between us. When we were in high school, we both started dating. We would tell each other which girls we liked. We would always try to help each other get the girl of our dreams. One Saturday in the middle of summer, we were both sitting in the garden enjoying the afternoon sunshine. We were looking forward to going out to a party that evening when suddenly I started to feel really sick. "I'm not feeling too good," I said to Tom. Tom looked at me concerned. "You don't look well," he said. He felt my head. "You have a fever, too." I went to lie down in my room. I told Tom he would have to go to the party alone. At first, Tom said that he would stay home with me, but I told him not to be silly. He should go and have fun. By the time Tom got home from the party, I was feeling a lot better. He came in smiling. He looked the happiest I'd seen him in a long time. "You look like you've had a good time," I said. "I met the girl of my dreams," he said. "That's brilliant," I told him. He went on to tell me that he had seen her from across the room. He hadn't actually spoken to her yet, but he said she was beautiful and he was going to ask her out on a date. I was so happy for him. The next day, I woke up and threw open the curtains. It was a lovely day, and I knew exactly what we could do. We should head down to the beach. I went down to the kitchen and found Mom sitting there eating breakfast. "Where's Tom?" I asked her. "Oh, he's not feeling well," she said. "I think he has the same thing you had yesterday." "He'll be fine," she said. "You go and spend the day with your friends." I got myself ready and set off to meet my friends at the beach. It was a really hot day, and I was looking forward to jumping in the ocean. I ran down onto the sand. I could see my friends already in the water. I took off my shirt and ran into the water. That's when I saw her. "Who is that?" I asked my friend Rob. "Her name is Sophie," said Rob. I went over to Sophie. I smiled at her and introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Andy," I said. "Hi, Andy," she said shyly. I thought I was in heaven. I had butterflies in my stomach and my heart was beating like mad. She was so cute. I didn't wait a moment longer. I asked her if she wanted to be my girlfriend. I couldn't believe it when she said yes. We spent the rest of the day by each other's side. When it came time to go home, I didn't want to leave her. "You must come back to my house. I want you to meet my brother," I said. When we arrived home, I took her into the lounge. "Wait here a moment," I said. I went to look for Tom. I found him sitting at his computer. "Come and meet my girlfriend," I said to him. Tom looked surprised but followed me downstairs. As we walked into the room, I saw Tom's face change. Why was he looking so upset? "This is Sophie," I said. "I saw you at the party last night," said Tom. That's when I realized Sophie was the girl that Tom had fallen for the night before. But now she was dating me. I felt bad for Tom, but I liked Sophie too much to give her up. Tom stormed out of the house. After that, we never really spent much time together. I was always with Sophie, and Tom went out with his friends. I missed hanging out with Tom, but he couldn't forgive me for getting the girl of his dreams. I finished school and started working at a research laboratory. I loved my work. It was so interesting trying to find the cure for different illnesses. I came in from work one evening and put on the TV. The newscaster was telling the story of a new virus that was going around. It was deadly, and so far there was no cure. I was thinking about what I had heard when Mom came in and looked at me sadly. "Tom has got the virus," she said. My heart sunk. "I'm going to help find a cure," I said. I was just about to head back to the laboratory when my phone rang. It was Sophie's dad. "I have some bad news," he said. "Sophie has got the virus." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. First my brother and now my girlfriend. I knew it was down to me to find the cure. I rushed back to work. My colleagues were already there, looking into microscopes and testing different medicines. They shook their heads as I walked in. We spent all that night and all the following day testing and checking. We tried everything we could possibly think of. Nothing worked. We knew that time was running out for Tom and Sophie. "This is impossible," I said. "We're never going to find the cure in time." "There is one chance," said the laboratory manager. "The only cure for this virus is from a special crystal belonging to an old man in a remote village in China." I knew what I had to do. I volunteered to go to China. I would find the man that had the crystal and bring it back. I headed straight for the airport and took the next flight to China. When I arrived there, I was tired, but I wasn't going to stop for a rest. I jumped on a bus and took the long journey out to the village where the old man lived. As the bus wound its way through the narrow roads, I looked out of the window. Everything looked so different from home. I felt a little scared, but I had to go on. Eventually, the bus pulled up in a dusty marketplace. I got off the bus and looked around. I couldn't see anyone around. I went into the little shop on the corner. The shopkeeper couldn't speak English, but I had the old man's name written on a piece of paper. I showed it to her. She looked at me, nodding and pointing down the road. I walked in the direction she had shown me. When I got to the end of the road, I saw a little wooden hut. I knocked on the door. A few seconds later, the door opened and an old man stood in front of me. He only had a couple of teeth, and it looked like he couldn't see very well either. I showed him the piece of paper, and he smiled. "I need the crystal, sir," I said. He beckoned me into his home. I waited while he went through to the back room. When he came back, he was holding a small bottle containing the crystal. It was a shiny blue crystal and looked very strange. He handed it to me. This was it. This was the cure for the virus. This was going to save Tom and Sophie's lives. I put the bottle safely into my pocket. I thanked the old man and ran as fast as I could to the marketplace to catch the bus back to the airport. When I landed back home, I went straight from the airport to the hospital. By now, both Tom and Sophie were in intensive care. There was no time to waste. I found their doctor and told him I had the cure to save them. He looked at me and said, "So, who are you going to save?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "I want to save them both." "But this crystal contains enough medicine to save one person," he replied. "You will have to choose whether we save Tom or Sophie." I couldn't believe it. How can anyone choose between their brother and the love of their life? I tried to think what Tom would tell me to do. He would say save Sophie, I thought. But then if I asked Sophie, what would she do? I could imagine her answer. "Save your brother," she would say. There was only one thing for it. I couldn't make this decision by myself. I would have to toss a coin and let fate decide for me. I took out a shiny silver coin from my pocket. I looked at it and said, "Heads, I save Tom. Tails, I save Sophie." My heart was beating like mad as I threw the coin into the air. It flew high up above me, spinning and turning before tumbling down towards me. I reached out to catch it on my hand, but instead I knocked it and sent it flying. The coin rolled across the floor and under a cupboard. I had to see what the coin had chosen. I lay down on the floor and tried to slide my hand under the cupboard. I could see the coin, but I couldn't reach it. I looked around the room for something to slide under the cupboard. In the corner was a broom. I grabbed the broom and was just about to slide it towards the coin when my telephone rang. The noise startled me at first. I reached for my phone. It was the laboratory manager calling. "Have you used the crystal yet?" he gasped. "No, I'm still trying to decide who to save," I replied. "Well, you won't have to," he said. He went on to tell me that while I was in China looking for the crystal, my colleagues were doing some more research. They had discovered that only half the amount of the crystal I had was enough to save one person. I jumped for joy. I had enough crystal here to save both Tom and Sophie. I ran to the doctor and told him the good news. "We can save both of them," I said happily. The doctor took the powder and instructed the nurses to give half to Tom and half to Sophie. I sat outside in the waiting room nervously, waiting for some news. It felt like I had sat there for hours when eventually the doctor came out. He looked at me, smiling. "You can go and see your brother and girlfriend now," he said. "They are both cured." I went into the room and saw Tom and Sophie both sitting up in bed and chatting away. At that moment, I knew everything was going to be all right.
I lived in a castle, and I'm not exaggerating. It was a literal castle in the south of Europe. My parents always explained to me that they were descendants of the nobility and that they had inherited a lot of wealth. I was quite comfortable. I had a massive bedroom with many windows and a balcony which had the perfect view of the ocean. It was located in the uppermost part of the castle, and if I had been allowed outside, I would have seen that it looked exactly like a tower. Once when I was a little girl, my caretaker Hannah was reading the story of Rapunzel to me, and she sighed. "Oh, you poor child. You were just like her." At that age, I didn't understand what she had meant at all. Before I continue, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you do, you will someday live in your dream house, and it will exceed your expectations. While growing up, I was surrounded by servants who did everything for me. They picked out my clothes, cleaned my room, brought me my meals wherever I demanded them, and even attended the tea parties I had with my dolls and teddy bears. I had every single thing I ever wanted, but I did not have an ordinary life. I had never ever left the castle. I'd never been to school, a park, supermarket, or even in my front yard. It was huge. It had been explained to me that I was allergic to a substance outside and that if I stepped foot out of the castle, I'd become terribly ill and die. I was always filled with envy and sadness when I watched movies about children my age who were able to enjoy their lives and visit exciting places. It seemed like I would be stuck at home forever. When I was bored with movies, I'd get my binoculars and point them out of my bedroom window. I'd spy on the people in a nearby town, and I watched them go about their daily lives with absolute fascination. Sometimes there were children playing games or engaging in sports, and I felt so alone and sad. I'd never even had a friend. When I was a teenager, I began to question everything, and I asked my parents to give me more freedom. One night, as my parents were preparing for bed, I knocked on their door and told them I wanted to talk to them. "I was watching a movie last night, and the characters were able to use the internet. Can I have an internet connection?" I said, hoping I could make some friends online. "No, you don't need that. You have lots of books. Besides, a lot of bad stuff happens on the internet. We don't think you should have access to that," my dad replied sternly. "I'm tired of being all by myself. Don't you think I get lonely sometimes?" I asked. "Well, I've never really thought about it, but now that you've mentioned it," my dad started. "Can I at least go to school? Is there nothing I can wear to protect me from this strange substance outside which I'm allergic to?" I asked. "No, that hasn't been invented yet, and it probably never will. Your condition is extremely rare," he replied. "Well, can I get into the school building without actually stepping outside? You know, if they maybe had an indoor garage or something," I asked. "Miranda, stop it! You cannot leave this house, period. Now get out of our room and go to sleep," my mom shouted at me. "Can I have a cell phone?" I asked. "No," they both shouted. I stormed off to my room and cried myself to sleep. I just wanted an ordinary life, and they were making no effort to understand me. Although I never went to a school, my parents paid the best tutors in the country to come to our house and teach me. I was learning as much as other high schoolers my age. But I still wanted to be in a real school around other people my age. I wanted to have friends, join clubs, go on dates, and maybe get drunk. I don't know, whatever teenagers were doing. I found my solace in my library. I read at least 5 books a week, and they made me more and more curious about the world outside. As my curiosity grew, I became more mistrustful of my parents. They had never been able to give me any specific details about my condition, and whenever I brought it up, they simply changed the conversation. One afternoon, I heard them leave the house. I assumed they were going to visit friends. I was left alone with the servants, who were all busy doing their work. I walked into my parents' bedroom and started snooping around. I noticed that my mom's laptop had been left open and unlocked. I started browsing through her folders until I found one titled Private. I quickly clicked on it, and what I saw next surprised me. There were thousands of my childhood pictures, and you were probably wondering why I thought they were weird. A mother should have her child's baby pictures saved somewhere after all, right? Well, the strange thing about these pictures is that they were all taken outside. There were several pictures of me playing with children at the playground, swimming in a lake, running through a meadow, and eating at a restaurant. What the heck? I thought. Now, before I continue, I must let you know that I don't remember anything that happened before I was 5 years old. I never knew why. All the baby pictures my parents had ever shown me had been of me inside of our house. I continued to browse. I stumbled upon a video. I clicked and watched myself playing in our backyard happily. I was laughing and running up and down like it was the best day of my life. How is this even possible? I asked myself. I opened another video and it looked as if I were in a park. I was playing games with some other children and we were all jumping and having a great time. I heard a rustling sound downstairs, so I closed all the files and left the room like nothing had happened. The next day, I decided to confront my parents after breakfast, just before they left for work. Mom, Dad, what have you been hiding from me? I asked. What do you mean, sweetie? My mom replied. Yesterday, I found many pictures and videos on your computer. All of them were of me as a child, and I was outside, I said. They looked shocked. Well, my mom started. I want the truth, I shouted. I'm so sorry, Miranda. We did this to keep you safe, my mom said. We never told you this before because we didn't want to freak you out. You are not allergic to anything outside. We made up this lie to make sure you stayed inside, my dad continued. Why? I screamed. Well, you know that we have a lot of money which other people envy. This has been both a blessing and a curse. You were having a pretty normal childhood until we took you to the mall one afternoon. You were holding my hand, but I felt you let go at one point, and when I turned around, I couldn't find you anywhere. We searched for you for 3 days with no luck. Then we got an anonymous call from a man who claimed to have kidnapped you. He demanded a $2 million ransom. We rushed to meet him right away and paid him, but we couldn't risk letting you leave the house ever again. We don't know what you went through these 3 days without us, but we reckoned that it was so traumatizing that we wouldn't want you to remember any of it. We acquired some pills illegally, which we fed to you. They erased your memory little by little until you had no recollection of the kidnapping or life outside of the house. We then tried to make your life as amazing as we could. Right here, he said. You didn't have to lie to me for such a long time, I replied. I was fuming. I was so angry that I stormed right out of the house on my own. They screamed at me and begged me to come back, but I pretended not to hear and continued walking. I walked until I reached the nearby town, the same one I'd always admired while looking through my binoculars as a child. It was a surreal experience looking at the cars zoom by and the people walking in groups talking about God knows what. I signaled to a taxi like I had seen people do in the movies. I got in and didn't give any directions. I just told the driver that I'd tell him when to stop. He drove for about 20 minutes, then I asked to get off. That'll be $15, he said. My heart began racing. I didn't have any money. I'm so sorry. I think I forgot my purse at home, I said. I expected him to scream at me, but instead he said, It's okay, kid. Here's $20. Go buy yourself something nice. I smiled as he drove off. I took a note of his license plate. I walked around until I approached a school. I looked through the window and tried to imagine my life as a normal teenager. When I got tired of that, I walked until I came across a small convenience store. I walked inside and bought a drink and a snack I had never seen before. It was the first time in my life I ever spent money on something, and it was a thoroughly thrilling experience. I was able to pick up a map from the store, and I looked at it for somewhere interesting I could go. After a few minutes, I decided on the zoo, which was only a few blocks away. I followed the map, and when I reached there, I paid the small entrance fee and went in. Apart from my pet cat Emily, I had never seen any other animals up close. As I walked around, I found all the creatures so fascinating, but still they made me very sad. The most depressing experience was watching a little koala bear stuck in a glass cage. He looked lonely and sad to be confined in such a small space. I realized that we actually had a lot in common. Just like him, I had been stuck for a long time. "I will free you someday," I whispered. I left the zoo in low spirits and found another taxi to take me home. I tried my best to explain the directions, then fell asleep. "Miranda!" I woke up to the sounds of my parents shouting at me. I saw my dad pay the taxi driver, and my mom dragged me out of the car. "What on earth were you thinking? How could you do something like that? Anything could have happened to you," she said. "Don't you ever do that to us again, or we'll lock you up and never let you out of this house again," said my dad. Gosh, they've become such monsters, I thought. My parents were upset with me for a few days after that, but I was able to negotiate with them so that I could be allowed to leave home once in a while. I had to be accompanied by 2 strong bodyguards who were not allowed to let me out of their sight. I told them about the nice taxi driver who had given me money, and they sent him $100,000 just to say thanks. I also managed to convince them to buy that koala bear from the zoo for me. I've made him a comfortable home in our massive garden, and he's no longer stuck in a cage. We're both a little freer now, and life is much better. But when I'm older, I'm going to leave this place for good.